It's Tuesday, the 22nd of the 4th, 2025. The time is 18 minutes past 10. There are very many F1-centric thread at which we need to pull post-morteming for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix Round 5, Jeddah Corniche. We got to talk about Max Verstappen in the first instance. So too, we'll talk about Oscar Piastri, what that performance means for the landscape of the 2025 season going forward. Lando Norris too we'll touch on. So too, we'll talk about Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, and the circumstance over at Scuderia and what it means for one Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson Hamilton. First round Hall of Fame, Mount Rushmore of F1, roundly underperforming the car, and now his teammate, the one formerly known as modern day Jean Lazy. Let's talk, and so too Carlos Sainz. Let's talk about Max Verstappen in the first hit. So let me show you this. We've seen a lot of chat on the F1 Twitters and Reddits about why Max Verstappen was so upset. What peeved the dude off apart from the 5-second penalty and feeling aggrieved that he was unjustly penalised? Well, I'll tell you this in the first instance, because that's not something that happens very often as far as Max Verstappen starting from pole and then getting beaten to the checkered flag. Rare. 80% is his conversion rate. Oh, by the way, he's no Lando Norris. Again, Lando was the one who lost a gazillion places last year. Max Verstappen is not that. He's the one whose defensive posture is God tier off the line. He's the one who does the Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Ayrton Senna thing. And if he puts it on pole, you can bet your bottom dollar that he's going to get to the checkered flag first. Not this time. Not at round 4, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and how and why I think is significant. Take a cheeky look at this telemetry. Look, you can see that Max Verstappen is first on the brakes going into turn 1. That's not like Max Verstappen. You'll remember lap 48, 2021, Brazil. Last of the late breakers. You'll recall Kota last year, last of the late breakers. Max Verstappen is nothing if not a tax avoider. He understands the rules and regs and how they are set unfair and how to bend/break them in his own image to his own gain. The Oscar Piastri then going into turn 1 as at round 5 the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was last of the late breakers against Maximilian Verstappen. That is different, chat. There's something new, something that I can't remember seeing, not for the longest time. Oh, and by the way, we'll talk about this. That's those graphics, by the way, courtesy of Aerotech on Twitter. Let me tell you about this. Put some respect. We'll talk more about that later in the Tuesday show, because I think that Max Verstappen aspect and complexion as versus Oscar Piastri, super ruthless, super cold, ad infinitum, in extremis, is significant. I'm telling you. Let me talk about Carlos Sainz very quickly, because this is in the umbrella heading of what we're about to talk about. Scuderia Ferrari, Sir Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc. You will have heard friend of the channel, Peter D. Windsor, saying a gazillion occasions now that Ferrari should not have gotten rid of that fella. Again, if you're going to criticise Carlos, is he the quickest? Probably not. Is he as quick as Charles Leclerc, point to point quickest on the grid? Probably not. But what he gives you as far as upside is that texture, that the nuanced level of technical feedback that not too many other drivers on the grid can give you, ergo spurring the team along. This graphic, courtesy of Autosport, shows the before and after effect of Carlos Sainz on each of these manufacturers come F1 teams, constructors' positions in the championship. Renault, before Carlos Sainz joined, they were P9. Once he joined in 2018, they were P4. McLaren, P6 to P3 between 2018 and 2020 when he left. 2020, Scuderia Ferrari were P6 in the constructors. By the time he left them, they were P2. Now, all of a sudden, 5 races deep, Williams were P9, and now they are sitting at P5 in the constructors. Maybe that's a nothing burger. Maybe that's coincidence, but I'm not sure. I'll be honest. I think Carlos Sainz is a special breed, not necessarily in terms of the absolute terms pace that he can bring to a team, but as far as his technical feedback, textured and nuanced, succinct and concise each and every single time. If you want an Adrian Newey, of course, that might be bigger. That might be better, but if you were to pair, let's say, in hypothetical games, an Adrian Newey with the technical feedback, God tier levels of a Carlos Sainz Jr., then I think you have all you need. Go on, let's talk about this Sir Lewis Hamilton thing, because it's techie over at Ferrari. I don't even know what to make about this. Look, go on, let me explain. The context is this. Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time champion, although saying that from 2022, when this rule and reg set of ground effect era car came into play, it's not been plain sailing for Sir Lewis, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We'll unpick those over the next 10 minutes or so. His performance hasn't been great. As versus George Russell, you heard Sir Lewis say, listen, I don't know what's going on, intimating that sabotage, that my tyre pressures, something happened to them, tyre deg would fall off in sector 3 as near as makes no difference each and every single qualifying session. And then you start to hear Sir Lewis this year, his utterances aren't dissimilar to that of last year. Mercedes, boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth, all the while Sir Lewis Hamilton fans around the world said that going across to the Italian team, Milan, Maranello, eating pasta, drinking red wine was going to make a difference. It was going to serve to resurge, renew Sir Lewis Hamilton, allow Lewis Hamilton, propel him to become his former self, the whirling dervish that dropped it on pole in his first season at Silverstone in 07. 2018, Sir Lewis Hamilton. 2021, Sir Lewis Hamilton, at the ripe old age, by the way, of 40 years old. Now, the Abbotsford reasons say that Lewis Hamilton is the greatest, and that entitles him, therefore, to an unprecedented 8th World Championship. But if that's what we're talking about, if that's the umbrella heading under which we're having this conversation, Lewis Hamilton winning an unprecedented 8th, then it's important in the first instance that we realise just how unprecedented these circumstances are. Only one man in Formula One history has done what Lewis Hamilton is trying to do, which is win a driver's championship at a third team. Juan Fangio did that. He's the only one. At 40 years old, you tell me how many drivers' championships have been won at that age or older. 3. 66 Brabham, Farina in 1950, and Juan Fangio again in 1957. This is an unprecedented Venn diagram as far as a Formula One achievement. Therefore, 3 or more teams at the ripe old age of 40 or older. Difficult settings, not impossible, not improbable, but very bloody difficult, particularly if you're Sir Lewis Hamilton going across to Ferrari that over the past couple of years, let's say, has been epitomised by operational infrastructure or lack thereof, poor strategic decisions, pit, Charles, pit, no, stay out. You remember all of those circumstances at Monaco. And so to a car over and above everything else that's been nothing short of temperamental. Let me play you this clip, because this is bloody important now. This is what Sir Lewis had to say as far as his how he sees his performance thus far, and in particular at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Roll the clip.
Achieved today?
Yeah, I was miles off pace-wise and didn't have the speed today.
What do you want to keep from these 3 weeks?
There's not really anything to take from the 3 weeks, except for I'm slow, so I've got to figure out how to undo that.
Was it achieved today?
As Lewis Hamilton saying, there's nothing to take from these 3 weeks, the triple header, other than the fact that I'm slow. And that wasn't the worst of Lewis Hamilton's quotables. How can you fix for your performance, Lewis? A brain transplant was the response. Why is Lewis talking like that? Well, he's nothing if not a true sayer, self-deprecating almost to a fault. But the results will speak for themselves. Here's what happened at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton was 5/10 adrift of his teammate Charles Leclerc, modern day journalese in quali, and more pertinently, more damningly in the race, a 50-lap race, by the way. So Lewis Hamilton ended up 30 seconds behind Charles Leclerc. That's 0.6 per lap. What are we doing? Are there circumstances for which we can normalise? Well, not really during the race. That's absolute terms pace. Charles Leclerc, 0.6 seconds down the road from Lewis Hamilton. And again, if you're gonna cry anomalies, 0.6 and 0.5 race versus quali, as near as makes no difference, the same. To which, again, I'm going to quote some Lewis Hamilton quotables. He said as well, it was horrible, not enjoying it at all. I was sliding around, first stint, massive understeer, car not turning, massive understeer, put that in your pipe, we'll revisit it. Massive tyre deg shortly thereafter because of the understeer potentially. And then the second stint, slightly better balance, but still just no pace. Yeah, pretty bad, says Sir Lewis Hamilton. Frederick Vasseur, though, comes out and has gone to bat for Sir Lewis. The rumour is that the head honchos, the C-suite exec level bods at Ferrari, a la John Elkin, are none too happy on their return on investment. Of course, they've pummeled tens of millions into Sir Lewis Hamilton per annum, by the way. They won't be happy at a measly sprint race, pole and victory. They want to see 25 points from Sir Lewis. That will be tantamount to what they determine, what they classify as return on investment, in contrast with the C-suite bods at Scuderia Ferrari, red team, with them their yellow badges and black prancing horse atop. Frederick Vasseur's come out to bat. He said that he's 2,000% behind Sir Lewis, despite seven-time world champions' troubling start to the 2025 season. He has argued that it's effing ball feathers to suggest that Lewis Hamilton's form has declined dramatically in recent times. Well, I don't think that's true, Frederick. If we're talking about since 2022, nobody's going to tell me for a second. Look, you can close your eyes and avert your gaze from the truth of light. If you want to embrace Abbott of Unreason, then this isn't a channel for you. However, if you're going to compare and contrast, if you look at Sir Lewis Hamilton from 2014, let's say, through to 2022, and then you analyse what he's doing, what he was doing then to what he's doing now, there's no way that you can argue that's even the same chap. The level of performance has done one of these, and I don't think it's a coincidence that in 2022 the ground effect era commenced. But I digress. Here's what Lewis had to say. He says that to improve this circumstance, he'll require a brain transplant to get the SF25 in line. Speaking to media, including Planet F1, courtesy of Planet F1, Lewis said it's going to be a painful 2025 and that there is no fix going forward. And again, that's reminiscent of some of his chatter at Mercedes. You recall when he was asked, are you going to be able to beat George in qualifying? He said, probably not between now and the end of the season. George will keep beating me. Self-deprecating, potentially to a fault. Motivational, potentially, or just being a Debbie Downer and or a truth sayer. I would argue that sometimes it's a mixture of all the aforementioned. Frederick Vasseur continued and said 2025 is not a transitional year from Sir Lewis. Ergo, we are expecting results this year, not next. Speaking to some Sir Lewis Hamilton fans, they said, listen, just write off this year. 2025, new rules and regs, active aero. That will be Sir Lewis Hamilton's year. But you don't pay somebody the money that they're paying Sir Lewis Hamilton as Scuderia Ferrari, a company with at the front and centre of its strategic objectives is to become a luxury brand, no longer a sports car brand. You don't pay somebody that amount of money to have a year off, for this to be a transitional year. That being said, Frederick Vasseur continues, it's not a transitional time, but for sure, he's down because when you finish the race in 6th, your teammate who's on the podium, you're going to be upset. Honestly, I take it as a positive, continues Frederick Vasseur, that Lewis is so down because if he were happy with this, then that wouldn't be normal. Lewis Hamilton said this, notwithstanding the fact that some noddy content creators tweeted that Lewis Hamilton said that he was going to be exclusively focused on winning his first for Ferrari, not just his 8th as far as driver championship tally is concerned. He's gone away and said, you know what, maybe Cameron CC is right. Maybe I do need to focus more on the driving. So urgent is the circumstance becoming, and has cancelled some plans this week. That's per Planet F1. Go on, and what's the secret? It's Techy, Benzi, Stephen. This is chaotic. So go on, here's the main event. What's the secret? Stuart Colding of Autosport has written an article deep diving and diatribing for all of the circumstances. Has gotten to the bottom of this. So too Kevin Magnussen in The Independent, an article saying the same thing. There is correlation here. So look, If you compare the rhetoric this year from Sir Lewis Hamilton to last year, it's similar. What he's referring to is an inability even to wrap his arms, his not insubstantial arms, around the handling dynamic of these cars. Now, what is that a function of? What is that by dint of? In the first instance, Lewis Hamilton's 40 years old, and what you're asking him to do is adapt and change, not just his way of being, but more pertinently as far as his performance, his driving style. Lewis Hamilton has always been last of the late breakers. You've heard the stories of Anthony Hamilton sat on the braking zone or the brake where he's supposed to be braking at least, and then forcing Lewis Hamilton as a child to brake another 10 meters down the road. Lewis Hamilton, like Maximilian Verstappen, around wet circuits and changeable conditions, has put in his 10,000 hours of last of the late breakers. That worked in 2014 through to 2021. 2022 though, ground effect, and you might argue that those cars that gain most of their downforce from the underside of the car, that this doesn't work. Danny Rick said something similar, Kevin Magnussen said something similar in the Independent, and they all have similar driving styles as far as how they optimize for lap time. Last of the late breakers, super aggressive, V-line each and every single time. That doesn't work though in the ground effect era. This is not the modus operandi. You want to keep stasis, the gap between the floor of the car, the underfloors, the Venturi tunnels and the tarmac as stable as possible, particularly when you're asking the car to do something a la combined entry, combined exit, apex settings. This is K-Mag talking now. He said that he's got a similar style in the article with the Independent, per Danny Rick, per Lewis Hamilton, and the ground effect cars didn't work for him either. Let me talk to you about Oscar Lando as an analogy. In the first instance, Mark Hughes has spoken ad infinitum about the difference between Oscar and Lando in ground effect. Lando's a U-turn Donny, a geometric racing line, likes to straight line these turns as far as possible, does one of these before turning in, asking therefore more of this ground effect cars than his teammate Oscar Piastri. That's significant. So too, as far as your throttle and your brake and your steering inputs, you want to try as far as possible not to overlap them, particularly your throttle and your pedal. Oscar is one of these guys. He's either on the brake or on the throttle. There is no overlap. For Lando, however, there is overlap. That's why you see this dude asking more of a car whose handling dynamic even is very temperamental and mercurial at the rear. That's why this dude is making more mistakes, more errors of the unforced variety, yeeting it into the barrier in Q3 in the paid sessions that matter. Fast forward now to Lewis Hamilton. How do you think that translates? Well, of course, if Lewis Hamilton is more like Lando than Oscar, of course he's going to struggle. Oh, and by the way, if Lewis Hamilton is a guy that engineers all of his pace, lower lap times, therefore, by dint of being aggressive on the brakes, you would think that constant understanding between Mercedes and Ferrari, that would make sense. However, they are not constant. Over at Mercedes, he had CI, carbon industry brakes. Now at Ferrari, he has Brembo. At the ripe old age of 40, you are asking Lewis to change his whole thesis, the whole way he's been extracting lap time out of this car. You need to be progressive and be confident on the brakes if indeed you're driving these 1,000 brake horsepower machines at 1,000 miles an hour. Lewis, because of the way that he's braking, because of using these bloody brand new Brembo's carbon versus carbon industry brakes at Mercedes, he has no confidence. Therefore, Peter Windsor told you yesterday on the F1 Hour that this is what Alonso was talking about in 2007. He had no confidence on the brakes because he had to change. Brembo was his cause before, and now he was on carbon industry, and he thought that Lewis Hamilton was nailing him in 07 because of that. Let me read out what Stuart Codling said, because this is important. Autosport's finest. He says, of the Ferrari 006 615 power unit, engine braking is understood to be lumpier as far as its shape and its curve than its Mercedes equivalent, inducing therefore understeer, which then forces Hamilton to steer more sharply and be later on the throttle. Chasing lap time thereafter would account for the greater tyre deg that Lewis is experiencing relative to his teammate in Jeddah. Leclerc was able to make his mediums last 6 laps longer despite spending the first 19 laps or so in dirty air of King George Russell's Mercedes. Hamilton was similarly bottled up behind Andrea Kimi Antonelli early on, but seemed to get no benefit once in the clearer air. Turtle Dove is Techy. Does it matter what the difference is between the brakes? I just think that there is a difference, is significant. Again, if you're 40 years old, and adaptability is the altar at which you need to win yourselves an unprecedented 8th driver championship. What Stuart Codling there is saying, the engine braking is Techy. It's very different from, as a circumstance, it's very different from what it was over at Mercedes. And that's going to act with downside ramifications. Now, if you don't have confidence in that, then of course you're going to extract a toll as far as understeering, which in turn is going to make the tyres deg at a quicker rate than your teammate who's gotten a hold of all of that. Colding continues of Autosport. God tier article, by the way. In a light and downforce endowed single-seater, just lifting off the throttle at speed gives a decelerative force akin to standing on the brakes in a high-performance road car hard enough to lock the front wheels. The progression of the engine's braking force is therefore bound up with a wider picture of other influences on braking feel. How does Lewis get his speed? Brakes and braking feel, and this is all different. Disc and pad materials, again, that's what the difference is. Brembo is what he's dealing with now as far as his braking discs and pads. CI, Carbon Industry, is what he was dealing with at Mercedes. And the brake-by-wire system, which aims to smooth out the effects of the MGU harvesting energy, the rear axle. Hamilton got off the throttle here. All right, go on, let's get Techy Chat as you round third base. I feel like I've harped on long enough on this, but I think this is important as far as understanding what Lewis Hamilton is struggling with. Coddling of Autosport writes, Hamilton got off Saudi Arabian Jeddah Corniche. Lewis Hamilton got off the throttle and braked earlier for turn 1, the all-important turn 1, turn 2, by the way, that's critical in producing a quick lap time at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Coddling writes of Autosport, Hamilton got off the throttle and braked earlier for turn 1, losing ground. Then again, at entry to turn 4, he feathered the throttle more at turn 9 and was 0.256 down by the beginning of sector 2. You'll recall, Ayrton Senna said you want to either be on the throttle or on the brakes. If efficiency is that's the way that you want to achieve your lap time. He's braking earlier and for less time. He's off the throttle sooner than Charles Leclerc. Coddling continues, at the next big braking point, turn 16, he was again earlier off the throttle and on the brake, longer off the throttle. Then he was a bit too aggressive on the gap. This is the same thing. At turn 22, Hamilton came off the throttle earlier, but less steeply. If you're going to come off the throttle, you need to do like Senna did and come all the way off the throttle and on the brake. This is very linear. Again, if you want to be quickest around a Jeddah Corniche circuit even. So, in summary, here's what Lewis needs to do to unlock for his lap time. He needs the confidence, and Ferrari would need to help him in that. He needs to expedite for his payoff period, understand the car more. Adaptability phase, you can give Sir Lewis Hamilton a bit of grace, but as at the 22nd of the 4th, he's earlier, as versus Charles Leclerc, he's earlier too frequently off the throttle, and he's spending longer on the brakes. His minimum speed through these turns is lower than Charles Leclerc, and again, that's a function of these brand new brake discs. Brembo at Ferrari, it was Carbon Industry over at Mercedes. It's a new circumstance. Some say that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change. And Umanch, I think that's the circumstance presented to Sir Lewis Hamilton and the one for which he is struggling. I don't know who I'll support if Max leaves. I'll support Charles and OJ. Oh, the humanity. Yeah, we can. Bad clutch settings. It's a recurring thing. We Dutchies call them Pope start, SH1T start. Watch the overlay of Lewis and Max at China sprint qualifying. Max was massive, saving amounts of time under braking, but the Ferrari had good acceleration. I think I've seen it already. Benzi, it's techie this. I really wish that Sir Lewis Hamilton can solve for these things, but they're not easy problems to solve for. Braking, again, he's made an industry out of being last of the late breakers, and now he's going to have to tinker with that circumstance because he doesn't have confidence on Brembos. It's brand new, and the overarching problem is that he doesn't have time. Much like Liam Lawson, the one thing that he needs is time using which he can adapt, get his feet underneath the Scuderia Ferrari table, understand the bloody brakes and leverage them like he's done his entire bloody career to put in God tier laps. 2018 Singapore, 2007 Silverstone as examples, Brazil 2021, the whole race entire, all by dint of his ability to be last of the late breakers. That demands confidence to be progressive on them, and that's the very thing as far as his brakes and braking that he doesn't have, as at the 22nd of the 4th 20250. The humanity.